And there's the YouTube error. Oh no! Oh no, I just gave like a full lecture and answered a bunch of questions people had sent me before. Oh, that's a bummer. I guess just had like a YouTube timeout problem. I'm really sorry about that. I thought I was talking. I thought I've been talking to people for 43 minutes, and that no one was responding. In that case, I'm gonna grab some water and yeah, wow, that's sad. All right, can everyone hear me now? Am I live now? Am I actually on? Okay, let me grab water because my throat's dry. Give me 1 second. Alright. Alright, I'm back. I'm going to skip the practice cuts part because I've already done that 3 times. No, alright. So, really, again, so I apologize. I thought I had been broadcasting for the last 45 minutes. I'm going to crack open a bottle of wine very shortly. Actually, you know what? Since it's all going to be lecture anyway, fuck it. I'm going to grab me that wine. Yeah, alright. Alright, so tonight, what are we drinking? Nice, adorable wine label here. Alright, so, again, I apologize, everyone. I had just given a lecture that I thought no one was... I thought everyone was giving me the digital equivalent of the glossy eye. 45 minutes late. I was streaming. I was giving a full class, Pete. It just, I was not actually... YouTube gave me some error, and it's embarrassing. I am used to, doing production, then releasing things, not doing this live business. Whoa, boy. Anyway, I just gotten done talking about, kind of like, I have some like new registering ideas based on, yeah, I know, it is laughable. It is very laughable. Newfangled technology. Anyways, I just kind of gotten done talking about one of the things that's kind of been interesting to look at as I've been putting together a curriculum for classes and such. Definitely drink the wine, yeah. Classes and such has been kind of looking at the structure of all the chapters of everything, right? And the word Hauptstücke itself. And the word Hauptstücke, chief pieces, principal pieces. Pieces, when you start kind of tracing Stücke, in terms of the German, the word can be traced back, also meaning show, like very close to schauen, or like show, but also demonstration. So I think it is interesting to take a look at all of these things as in terms of demonstrations. The idea of principal demonstrations. And so, again, So what they're kind of doing is laying out 5 distinct chapters that can kind of then be applied across these, that are then kind of proven throughout the whole text, right? One of the things that and so what brought me to this was so reading. I mostly use this version of the text. A lot of folks know I'm usually in class hugging this book and kind of crying a little bit. I'm crying a lot of it. There's a section when we start getting to Hangen, Vinden, Strackfenster, and that kind of those bits at the end. It's always kind of seemed weird that they were sitting at the end because Zornhau, the gloss on the Zornhau stuff, kind of you need to know the windings, and there's kind of talk of Long Point and Strackfenster, etc., etc., etc. And it's always kind of, the idea has always been, oh, you hyperlink to that section, which is probably true, especially in some of, like this gloss even says, like, oh, and the windings are explained later in this section. Go to this spot and read this. But what is interesting is that in this version of the text, there is mention of towards the end, and here ends the new notes. And part of me doesn't think that it's completely talking about let's see, completely talking about like the gloss itself, if that makes sense. Like part of me thinks that it might be talking about that little segment at the end, right? Like what if it's talking about, okay, so those chapters were kind of confused about like why it's sitting in there. Oh, that's the new notes. So that kind of implies, oh, there were old notes. So maybe these hyperlinky things weren't there in the old notes. Maybe more of it was originally reliant on kind of communicating things in person, which is fine. A lot of this probably was anyway. There's probably a lot of things not in here. Definitely not. Some things missing. But anyway, back to the original point. So there's kind of so that aside, so that little piece of insight aside, it made me kind of go back and think about, all right, well, how are all these chapters structured? Like, especially the way the 5 hues are structured. And they're structured in almost in a very common way, where there's this like demonstration, explanation and demonstration of the principal core technique, usually in terms of its vor or knock application, right? And then it starts, especially in Zornhau, it begins talking about the creek. Like I know some people argue it's not the same chapter, but it kind of technically is tucked under that heading, right? The Iddelkrieg, which is you come to a bind and then you're fishing around using the windings, which is the war. You're searching for the openings, right? So the idea of Zornhau is use your sword like a shield and then start moving around, and then you're kind of jumping between the openings, trying to beat your opponent to the next spot, right? But in the same way, you have to do so in such a way that keeps you safe. Okay, that's really, really interesting. That's cool. All right, that makes sense. And then it talks about Mutieren and Duplieren. Oh wow! But it already sent me to the windings. Mutieren and Duplieren sound a lot like the windings, right? Because the windings themselves talk about how there's the 4 quadrants, there's the ox, right and left, and flug, right and left, and then there's 2 windings in each one, and then from each of those those 2 windings, there's a cut, a slice, and a stab. So there's like the 24 windings, etc., that gets all that business, right? So why are we doing all this with Mutieren and Duplieren if it's already been laid out for us what to do with the feeling a little bit, right? Or if that's already if that's being described later, why is it here? Part of me thinks that maybe because if the Hangen, Vinden, Strackfenster, etc. area is maybe the new notes, Mutieren and Duplieren kind of sit back there because it hasn't been explained, because it's not included in the rest of things, right? Aside, right? Anyway, so what we then see is the structure of Zornhau, where you're taught how to use your sword as a shield in the vor, because the Zornhau is always done from the vor, and then you are taught how to respond to the pressure, and then how to apply the Krieg, or how to chase the openings, right? The Krieg, you're chasing the openings in some way or another, right? And then you can move on to Krumpau, similar thing. Very basic explanation of the technique, and then you are given a way, how you're giving methods to chase the openings, right? A lot of the Krumpau stuff either sounds like some type of laming strike, or is some type of attempt to cut them as they pass you, or trying to take center by rob them of the center by not by exiting, by going offline, kind of thing. But then it starts getting into, okay, so if you're in a bind, this is how you hunt the openings from the bind. Now, if you and that includes thrusting, and then it starts getting into schnappen, right? It starts getting into the ideas of how to start using the cuts as a way to move between those openings. Good, cool. Okay, we've been introduced to that concept. Then you move into Zerkau, and then same thing, how to do it in the vor, knock, start getting into some thrusting things, and then it really starts getting into zacking to the 4 openings, right? Like moving between the openings using Zerkau, and whether your interpretation of hunting those openings is you cut to then thrust, or to then actual cut the target. It all still plays in the same. You are kind of winding by using the hues. Oh, interesting. And then you move on to like Schielhau and Scheitelhau, which is different is similar, like a mixed bag, right? Schielhau mostly being used for displacements, but also, again, depending on your interpretation, is a lot about thrust work, right? Hunting the opening using the thrust. So we're kind of returning to the idea of Krieg and Winden. And then Scheitelhau is a lot about using the hues, like an overhue, to kind of reach the person using kind of almost a Sterchhau kind of approach. And so what I find, and then you get into the main demonstrations of how all of it kind of unites using these additional little bits. And so I'm fine. So the thing that kind of came to me is just, oh wow, there are in these 5 pieces of the films, Huan, there's all the, or Howen, there's all of like the application of these, for the most part, that we all like the slice gets the least amount of love throughout the Zettel for the most part, but there's the application of Winden as the core of all of these things, and I also found, and that kind of brings in a lot of questions about like what is the full intention of, say, a lot of these hues? Is it based on distance? Again, are you intentionally always going to try to find a bind, or find it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's something I actually would like to do, hopefully, when we can start fencing together, is starting to use Winden, like the end pieces, right? The end chapter, as kind of a foundation, kind of this core, this root of everything, that throughout the Zettel, right? Trying to use the Winden and like the 3 Wunder in context of the timings, and feeling is everything. It kind of plays into a lot of like what Madel was talking about in his later stuff, which was, it's just the crossing of arms, and you're fighting for the overbind, etc., etc. But I think a lot of that still exists. I think a lot of that exists like here too, and I think it also changes the context of how we think about KDF fencing. There's this concept where a lot of it's about big strikes, these big wide strikes, with some like these deep thrusts and everything else. I think it kind of changes some of the context for it. Just a little bit, the idea that maybe, yes, there are some deploying cuts or deploying hues, like they talk a lot, like Zerkau from the shoulder, Zornhau from the shoulder, and like to the target, which I'm not saying is incorrect, but there's also the idea of you want to get the sword out, and we'd be implementing smaller cuts this already is currently in our system of like say like duplirin, very very accepted KDF technique, where we're on sword and we're cutting based on the we're cutting based on the pressure and placement of our sword. Using so again, recontextualizing how the approach that we're using the offensive tactics as much as we are the defensive things. Let's see. I had some other thoughts. But yeah, so that was kind of like just some overall thoughts I had about like Vinden and like how and how these things are structured and how they're kind of being presented to us. If there is like ways that we should be reinvestigating some of what we're doing in terms of maybe like a longsword is a little more thrust based with kind of like if you look at some of like the Meyer rapier stuff, there's a lot of cutting and thrusting and slicing in that stuff as well. It's just a different weapon. This is a two-handed weapon that's attempting to do the same thing, especially since these were not wartime weapons. They're weapons that were like traditional dueling, and if they were brought to war, it was very much for like a more showy kind of interpretation, and the tactics in here are nowhere near battlefield ready, as one would say. So they're definitely dueling field tactics. Or fencing, or whatever the equivalent of sport fencing was at the time, even if it was involving injuring or murdering the other person, right? So I guess what it boils down to is one thing I'm really looking forward to practicing or working on or working through is the idea of expanding our application of Vinden from, like I said, we usually think of it a lot of as thrusting work. But I'd also like to really start taking a look at it in terms of cuts and stabs, cuts, shallower thrusts, and slices, and that's just based on some of the more kind of academic elements that I've kind of drinking a bottle of wine, reading the Zell, getting the red string and index cards out. So that's where I'm at. Yeah, alright, so I'm hoping that was not a 17 minutes of your life you'll never get back. But yeah, alright, so for the remainder of the time, I'm leaving it open to the floor. Ask me anything. At me with those questions, yo. I'm going to click over to the Discord real quick because I know there were some stuffs. Learning more about refining the Weerhoeden and when and how to use them efficiently. I say we should always be using the Weerhoeden. They kind of are the pass-through, beginning and ending space of everything. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to kind of express. There's the application in Hangen, and then, but it's something we'd have to explore more. I think it's better with at least one other person to demonstrate. How would I recommend starting? Tybee, I would say that we recommend starting with like the Vinden stuff. As an experiment, I would be interested in say like attempting to do like setting up. Maybe there's a way to set up drills or practice scenarios where we always begin in say Sprechfenster and we are always just kind of attempting Vinden against each other, if that makes sense. Always trying to keep our sword in front of us while trying to reach the other person. So basically two people face off and then can only fight from long point or some type of wound, from the flug or ox or long point, and that's it. But you can cut and thrust between all of them. Might be a way. I'd have to, we'd have to refine it, and again, something that might be better in group format. But experimenting also in the idea of one thing I've always thought was really interesting is like the idea of Krumpau, especially from like Wontag. If you do a Krumpau in Wontag, it starts looking a lot like ox if you end up here, right? Especially if you're trying to distinctly cut over someone's hands. Even if you begin like the Schrankhut, it's when you start doing like certain cuts from the Krumpau, it starts looking like this. Same with interpretation of the Scheitelhau. A little too tall here. And then you're cutting and then dropping your point. It starts looking like an ox again, yeah? So maybe another idea would be trying to do the hues out of, like, always trying to cut between the windings, and then see how that experiment works when there's pressure being applied, and using these same concepts of Winden, of like hard and soft in the bind for the windings, but then trying to do maybe some hues out of that. Again, it's one of those situations that we have with HEMA. It can be really hard to solo practice because we require that feedback sword on sword to a certain degree. It's not saying all things must be partnered practice, but at the same time, it does help. Swallow. It was a HEMA Ask Me Anything. I don't know anything about birds. The peregrine is the best bird. Just know that. Let's see. Do you believe that it is intention of the cuts to cut into it? Yeah, maybe. I think that it's kind of case by case. I mean, it probably is safer to do the cut into a bind to a certain degree. But we do have because if you look at like the kind of the closest things we have to say like the Ansetzen is the idea of you're not hewing into for the most part, right? Like setting someone on, like the Ansetzen attacking first and taking the vor, hitting them before they're able to respond is mostly like putting the tip out, and then thrusting in a way that cuts off their line, and then thrusting them in the face or chest in a way that cuts off their sword, or doing it from below in a way that like keeps their sword low or locks off their sword in some way. So I'm not saying, but at the same time, the Zwerchhau section says that if someone isn't moving and they let you get too close, cut in a way that allows you to lock off their sword and cut them in the head. So yes and no. I know the Monty Python reference. I'm just not engaging. I'm just not going to engage. Let's see. Things you can do at home. Practice footwork. Footwork is something that we're perpetually trying to improve. Work on keeping your back straight, your chin up. Not taking deep lunge steps, but very structured steps, be it passing or gathering. And a big part of that is fears you won during the war. That's a good question. I think it's funny that it's kind of giving footwork tips. Footwork and movement of the feet as you wind during the war. I think, again, that's a case-by-case situation, because the thing about the war is we're always trying to move into whatever the opening is, that keeps us safe. So you always want to make sure that you are in a structurally sound way, and we should be, it does talk a lot about moving left and right, and to keep your sword between you and the other person. There is always a lot of talk about, like, the difference between fencing with a blunt and a sharp, and that does radically change how people react. I think a lot of this, especially if these are sharp, and you see this in the machete fight videos all the time. We're gonna the war is probably gonna mostly be out here, unless someone's really crazy, right? Which does happen, but you always want to move in such a way that you're always remembering good footwork, keeping yourself structured. Because the minute your footwork, you start crossing your feet in weird ways, or taking too deep of lunge steps, or or putting your feet together in more of a dance pose, you instantly you start kind of giving your opponent an advantage. I'm not saying it means instant death, but or instant loss, because it's a sport we're playing, right? But it can mean that you're giving someone an opportunity to kind of take advantage of a weakness. But I would say always try to make sure that your body you're moving your feet in such a way, kind of like the machete warding drills, like we do. Always trying to put that off the foot that is closest to the engagement back. That's general advice, but again, it's case by case. In general, how's everyone doing? How's everyone holding up? Holding up, yeah. I can imagine it also is difficult having to work from home and also school from home. What type of bird, Joe? Oh, well, peregrine thing. I mean, Tiger, I say you could do both. The text even says whatever you do with a messer, you can do with a sword, and vice versa. I just have a messer here because all my gear is at the sword space, and I haven't been able to get it yet. And also, this messer's hilt is so long that I can use it like a long sword because I got tiny hands. The fact that they're using Google Classroom is kind of interesting. I kind of dabbled with it to try to use it for a sword class, but it never kind of I could never quite wrap my head around it in a way that made it feel. It never felt functional. If that makes sense. Sorry, Google. I mean. Also, any form of consistency at this point is probably welcomed, right? Yeah. Okay. I could see that. I'll have to play with it. This Discord thing is kind of nice because you can embed documents and videos and different things in it. Plus, I don't really have quizzes. We don't have like exams and gradable material like I'm sure they have to do all the time. Though it would be fun to assign like written homework. Yeah. Day by day, everything's all right. As I think a lot of folks know, I think I mentioned the last time, I got laid off from my job, so we're back on the unemployment train. So Yeah, sign up for the Discord. It's I don't know. It's the new future, the hipper, less pain in the ass Slack. Other household objects you would recommend for practice? Yeah, hammers are a different weapon entirely. I mean, again, I always go back to wooden soup spoon, like a big wooden spoon, right? Broom handles can work too if you have the space for the broom handle. Yeah, please don't use hammers unless you're trying to do like a weight training thing. I mean, yeah, I think it's if you're like more advanced students like that, it's okay. Please just be careful, especially if you have pets. Please be careful. A lot of pets like shiny things. Lies. What lies? Oh. Yeah. It's a good messer trainer. That's a heavy messer trainer, though. Honestly, like with the windings, it's kind of like you're kind of shifting. I find that it always begin. The long point is always a good place to begin, unless you're trying to incite someone in. Then that's what Zornhouse for, right? And then Duplieren is very much a cut inside a wind, right? I mean, it's hard to demonstrate because there's no pressure here. But again, do little Zwerkhaus within the wind. You can be an ox, and then you can make this into a cut with the right footwork, right? I'm on a carpet here that's not well weighted, so I'm sliding around like a moron. But I think that's why there's a connection between the footwork we do and the actual work. The offensive. I guess, long story short, the best guards to use are ones that are both tip forward and allow you to Flug and Ox and Spreckfenster. Though you can probably, make other things work. Don't go there, John. Don't go there, John. I mean, what I do appreciate about the idea of the windings and the application of feeling therefrom is that it actually limits the Rolodex of concerns, if that makes sense. One of the problems I have about looking at the whole thing as a collection of techniques that are just there waiting for the right opportunity to spring is the fact that it creates, which is more true of later systems, as kind of like as some of the fencing curriculum probably changed for who it was for, etc., etc. Fiore has so many words. So does Meyer. If you look at everything as just this catalog of techniques, the Rolodex of reactions that you have to deal with in your head just gets bloated and oh shit, what am I going to do? And by the time you've gone through the index, it right in the head, right? So, one thing I'm always interested in is kind of boiling down the KDF core and looking at it from what is the most foundational thing that we can teach that then everything else is kind of connected to. So therefore, when you are having all this adrenaline running through your body, don't care who you are, you still have a lot of there's this level of excitement, right? When you're dealing with this stuff, both chemically and physically, you are then you're sitting there able to fence, and you're sitting there and you're going to be able to fence and access a thinner catalog of things that are completely functional, allow you to engage your opponent in a way that's meaningful, and which means keep you safe while scoring the point. Pasta emoji. Oh, okay. Well, as long as Josh, as long as you're not like talking about dusting the wets, I think I'll allow that emoji. Yeah, hammer is definitely good for like weight training. Josh, that's a way to get banned real fast. The wine's okay. It is definitely a $9 bottle of wine. It is delicious, and it's a little sweeter than I normally would like, but it has a really cute elephant on the label, so I'm not gonna complain. Community. Hold on. Let's see. The server on Discord. Okay. Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Like why? So the question being on why Longor isn't one of the Virhuten, but we're eventually told to basically fight from there. Part of it is probably because they are trying to, and I'm paraphrasing Jess Finley's kind of approach, and probably doing it very poorly, so I apologize. Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea being that you're kind of being led to this tree of knowledge, and Spreckfenster is kind of towards the top. It's the best thing you could learn, so therefore it's kind of towards the end. I think also part of it is the fact that Long Ort is kind of taught, it's Zornhau, the Long Ort, right? Like, but at this... Yeah, exactly. What Joe just commented. But another part of it is that like Spreckfenster and Longort, it's like Longort is mentioned. It's like the thing you end up in after the Zornhau, right? It's like Zornhau, and then they talk about and then you're in shoot the long point. It's kind of like there's this one is the application of the other, like Spreckfenster is the kind of Saison of the Chuda, or do I have that backwards? Like one of them is like a sitting position, like Spreckfenster, you're waiting, and then like the long point is kind of the Einschießen, the shooting the tip, Meanwhile, also the Virhuten, I think, are also misunderstood as they are kind of like considered like the wards, if that makes sense. So that there's also this kind of how do I put it? Because you are taught Zornhau first, and Zornhau is what introduces the long point. So like you're kind of taught them later as these kind of more piecemeal things, as Joe said, because at the beginning you might not understand how to fence with them too well, all these things too well, and so by working up to it, then you can use the magic of the Spreckfenster from everything. But you have to see all these other demonstrations of things before it all kind of makes sense. That also kind of fits into the idea. I mean, don't forget, like, there's also Schrankhut in there. There's other things being mentioned that are not brought up under that chapter, right? So it is kind of weird. I assume that part of the reason there are only Vierlega have something to do with the fact that it is this whole thing is being presented as an argument in the classic, like a classical argument, in the original sense, and so that there's a reason that they're kind of like backpedaling information and trying to wedge something into a mold that was considered the science of the time, in order to either feel more, either to be able to present it to like a more aristocratic group. But, you know, that's just my thought. I very much, I think I definitely like, again, also the Spreckfenster stuff falls under, like I was talking about before, it falls under what might be considered the new notes. So it is quite possible that, like, the Hangen and Vinden and Spreckfenster, which are all kind of grouped together at the end, are an addendum to a previous text that we just haven't found or aren't aware of, or just was never really recorded in any significant way that to have survived. So yeah. Yeah, it's like the idea of like long point and then Spreckfenster, or Spreckfenster being the thing you're doing in order just to watch for the other implementation. There's also someone once told me, I forget which one of my teachers said this, but the idea that Spreckfenster might have just kind of it's just another term for the long point, as the text says, but it's also just like at some point someone tried to just be like, this is my addition to why this is better. I guess the verb compared to the adjective, maybe. Maybe I'm not nailing the correct semantics there. And again, if we're always supposed to fight from long point, regardless of the actions of the other person, it becomes, these other actions start looking a lot like windings, right? Like, I'm trying to cut Zwerkow from long point. Even if I do the footwork, it still starts looking like some of these windings. Right? So it's there might be more overlap with longsword and some of like the proto rapier / rapier kind of historic fencing than we'd like to, maybe like most HEMA people, or historical fencing than most the HEMA people would want to admit. Let's see. I did start reading that book, Red Shirts, by the way. It's posted in the Discord as a free ebook. It's really funny if you're a Star Trek or some general science fiction-y person. It's real easy, real fast to read. It's only like 300 pages or something. It's fast. It's fun. I'm almost finished with it. I highly recommend it. Is anyone else reading anything interesting? Reading or watching or listening to anything interesting right now? let's see. While I'm waiting for those responses, the other thing, I guess, I got a question, actually. Yes, this is very true. What was I going to say? In addition to kind of hosting these little, like, Ask Me Anything, fireside chats, etc., etc., I am working with Sword Class NYC right now to do some online class stuff through their portal, working out the details of that. Joe, I will check that out. Interesting. Yes. That sounds interesting, Tybee. Super obstacle is the way. Oh, that's very cool. That sounds interesting. So I'm working. I'm going to be working with Sword Class NYC folks to get some online classes up. I'm going to continue doing these kind of live things. I promise they'll start in time. Working through the technical issues. Just to kind of like directly interact with people. I always want people to know that I'm available via like Discord or email or phone. Contact me via email or phone for my for like phone numbers or etc. etc. Is there anything else? We're just hitting about 8:30. So I'll keep you all updated regarding like online class stuff. Yep. Peter, I have a lot of thoughts about that are interesting, and I think that's like dead astronauts probably not. Oh, okay. I mean, the techniques from the windings. It's like I want to play with it more. Like I said earlier, I want to play with it more. Kind of want to see it work and not work. Experiment. Sword science. Dead astronauts probably not recommended unless you really like Jeff. I mean, I liked Annihilation. But the sequels to Annihilation were annoying. I'll keep you all updated about the online videos, the classes. But again, I want to continue these kind of like live moments. I think it's always good to kind of have like lecture time, or like there's always good. It's always good to have like lecture time. And be working with a teacher, be it like in a more interactive way than I think just straight up videos can provide. At the very least, the live stream, like you can type questions about something, etc., etc., etc. Please, so if people are interested and people are getting something out of this, let me know and I can continue this. And if you want, we can try to do 2 a week instead of 1. But that's up to you. I want to leave that up to you. I don't want to just be kind of spitting out into the universe and people just get bored or something. Let's see. There's a text. Oh yeah, if you look and if you join the Discord Sword Class, people have been kind of like sharing some of their ebooks, and there's a really good one called Red Shirts. Tor gave it away, or whoever the publishers gave it away. For free. Really fun read. Totally recommend it. I know that personally, I have my Kindle, not my Kindle, my Mobi Scribe or my e-ink device, because I live in a studio apartment now, so I can't have all the books that I would love to have. Is like basically full. It's just full of books, and and I'm very, very excited to um, to get through them and have all the time. I'm glad, I am glad that these things are helping things feel more normal. That's kind of my intent, you know. Not a lot of things. Everything feels off. It's kind of, or at least to me, everything feels really off. And being able to kind of talk about HEMA for an hour and a half has been very helpful for me. So I just hopefully it's been helpful for me to spew my brain squidded sword philosophy out. Does anyone else have any questions comments, or concerns, or just anything they want to talk about before I kind of toss to the wolves of Discord, or the Discord? Oh, of course, we miss you too, Tybee, and even when things kind of start creeping back to things that resemble normalcy, I hope to maybe continue doing some more online things just to kind of help connect with everyone. I'm going to be definitely engaging with the Discord more, and maybe posting like little small videos just to helpful. Oh, great! Yeah, Pete, it's thank you for joining. I really appreciate your questions and insights. I'm hoping that maybe we can get like a round table chat thing going with everyone. It'd be great. I'll definitely let everyone know when the next one is. And Leanne, I look forward to working on getting you into teach a class on the slice for folks. Folks who've been coming to Tuesdays know that I've been trying to get students who have particular interests of things kind of to teach little classes here and there. Katie Mead did a really, really fantastic class on being a good, being a better drilling partner, and I look forward to hosting that one again, because I think we all need to be reminded of it constantly. But also, Leanne, I'm trying to get Leanne to put together a little piece on a little class on her favorite, The Slice. Oh, happy HEMA-versary, Dina! 6 years. Huh. 6 years in HEMA years. That's got to be that's a thing, right? Homework for everyone. Footwork and distance management, and distance and winding practice would be my 3 things. I would say footwork. Think about the good structured footwork. Back straight, chin up, feet shoulder width apart, and not extending too far, feet past each other. HEMA years are kind of like dog years. They count exponentially. Other homework. Yeah, sorry, back on that track. I forget the lag, so I get excited about the chat when. Anyway, so footwork, work on footwork, both passing, gathering, and triangle stepping, and winding, especially because I really want to experiment with this whole Spreckfenster winding Hangen thing. Different iterations of the winding, right? Like, so like there's the traditional windings in which you're trying to kind of rotate around the tip between the different lager, and then there's also other iterations of the windings in which you are moving left and right and kind of fighting for this, kind of fighting for the overbind in many ways, which is also another iteration. And I think there's a kind of another version of winding, but that's for a class in sword science time. More, how you say, red string theory with Peter time. But yeah, so that would be, I'd say, homework. The final chapters, the Hangen, the Winden, and the Dreiwunder, and the Spreckfenster, and like the Dreiwunder out of these things. All right, everyone. If there's no more questions or comments, I'm going to end the stream. Please talk. Please continue the conversation. Any more info? Overbind is going to be difficult for me to explain at the moment because there's no overbind happening, but it's definitely something we can talk about. It generally means that you're winding your sword in a way that is attempting and moving your body in such a way. George Silver kind of refers to this as the true cross. It's part of George Silver's true cross, in a way that you are able to both get your sword on top of the other person's sword while still threatening them. But that can be, once I have someone in a physical space with me, we can go through some of that. Anyway, it is 8:40-ish. I'm going to sign off for now here. I will be on the Discord because it's just kind of open on my computer because I live there now. Go read a book. Go watch a movie that you love. I want to encourage, before I sign off, I just want to say I want to encourage everyone to do their best to study and practice. Try to find little ways to add workouts to your stay-at-home, work-at-home situation. If you're still going to work, take the hours you're already practicing and try to join us for these online study sessions. In general, make sure to gift yourself the time of practice, not just here, but also for all that time that you carved out initially for yourself outside of here to practice and etc. Make sure to gift yourself that time. I know there's a lot of people are feeling isolated, and one way to kind of combat that is to work your body, which kind of helps. If you're very mindful in the way that you practice, hopefully that will alleviate some of those feelings, or at least help with the coping of that. So gift yourself that time of distraction in terms of practice. And when it does come time to reopen the effectual doors, I just want to remind everyone to be easy on themselves. It is difficult to train when you're alone, especially HEMA. Not just because, and it is multiple things. Like, it has a lot to do with not having the feedback, but also being alone can be difficult to in practice. Not having that kind of that feedback or that encouragement, right? So I want to just emphasize it can be difficult to train alone or mostly alone. And when you come back into the effectual, you're gonna probably feel out of practice, but it's okay. We're all going to feel it. Even if we're able to go to the gym, use a home gym or something, work out every day and practice every day on our own, we're all going to feel out of practice. And one of the hardest parts of a martial art is when you have to go on pause and come back. and there's layers to that, both physical and psychological. But just know that you're not alone in feeling the things that you're feeling. Together we can like help each other when we can get back into the dojo and Effectual, or even like with these, we can all help each other, and eventually we're going to be able to rally with each other in person, and we're going to be able to help each other return to our previous state of practice. I just want everyone to remember that you're not alone. You are not alone. You're not alone in your worries, fears, and concerns. And I know our community. I know our HEMA community, and it's a good one. And that we're all going to get through this together. And so with that, I'm going to say good night, or at least goodbye from the live stream. But I'll see you all in the Discord and in the social medias. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll let you know when the next one's coming up. Bye!